The bar smelled like citrus and warm candle wax. My whiskey sat there, amber under the low light, next to two untouched martinis and a black cloth napkin folded into a hard little square. Behind the counter, the liquor shelves glowed. Through the tall glass, the city blinked awake. She leaned in close, her hand warm against my wrist, and I did not pull away. My fiancé's sister secretly met me at a restaurant. Neither of us knew my fiancé saw everything. There was a small paper crane by my glass. I still do not know why it made my chest ache. My name is Desmond Ellison. I am 34 years old, and I design libraries. Quiet buildings where people go to be alone together. That is how I have always thought of them. Rooms full of strangers, each one lost in a different world, all of them somehow keeping each other company. I run a small firm here in Atlanta. 3 of us, some good coffee, and a lot of late nights. It is not glamorous work. Most people never notice the buildings they feel safe inside. But I have spent my whole life trying to make spaces that hold people gently. And a long time ago I made my peace with going unnoticed. I live alone. A tidy apartment on the east side, tall windows, more bookshelves than furniture. I like it that way. There is a certain kind of quiet you only earn after your life falls apart once, and you rebuild it with your own 2 hands. Because it did fall apart. 3 years before any of this began, my marriage ended. Her name was Camille. We were young when we married, younger than we understood, and for a while I believed we were happy. Then one evening she sat across from me at our own kitchen table and told me she was leaving. I keep waiting, even now, to feel angry about it. And the anger never really comes. She did not leave because I did something wrong. She left because someone shinier came along. A man with a bigger name, a faster car, a life that photographed better. I could not compete with a highlight reel. And honestly, after a while I stopped wanting to. What that left me with was not rage. It was a question, and the question followed me around for years. Was I ever loved for who I actually was, or only for how well I fit the picture somebody wanted? I sat with that question a long time. I stopped dating. I poured myself into the work, into blueprints and load calculations and the smell of old paper, which I have loved since I was a boy. There is nothing else like it. The dust and glue and time all soaked into an old book. I used to think a person could be like that too, that you could open someone up years later and still find them holding together. And then, about 10 months out of the divorce, I met Blair. She walked into a real estate mixer downtown like the room had been built for her arrival. Everyone turned. I turned. Blair had that gift. She could make a whole room bend toward her without saying a single word, just by standing at the center of it. She was beautiful and quick and certain of herself. And for a man who had spent a long, quiet year feeling invisible, being chosen by someone like that felt like being pulled up out of deep water. I mistook that pull for warmth. It took me a long time to learn the difference between being adored and being seen. Blair sold luxury homes, the kind with wine cellars and infinity pools, and she was very good at it. She knew how to make people want things. Somewhere in there, I think, she decided she wanted me. Or she wanted the version of me that looked good, standing beside her, a rising architect with a civic project in the newspaper. I did not see it that way then. Then, I only saw a woman who laughed easily and looked at me like I was the answer to a question she had been asking her whole life. We moved fast. Too fast, my friend said, though never quite to my face. Within the year, we were engaged. I remember sliding the ring onto her finger and thinking, so this is what it feels like to be wanted again. What I did not know yet was how loud that kind of wanting can be. How it can fill a room so completely that you never once hear the quieter thing standing just outside the door. Because Blair had a sister, a younger sister, softer spoken, who worked with old books and had ink on her fingers more often than not. The first time we met, she barely said a word to me. She just watched, the way some people watch when they already know something you do not. Her name was Nadia. The months that followed were not loud. That is the strange part. When I look back on the year I was engaged to Blair, the memories that stayed sharp are not the ones with her in them. They are the quiet ones. And almost every one of them has Nadia somewhere in the frame. Nadia was everything her sister was not. Where Blair filled a room, Nadia seemed to fold herself into the edges of it, content to sit and listen. She was a bookbinder and a paper conservator at a little studio near the university. She spent her days repairing things other people had given up on. Split spines, water-stained pages, brittle old letters somebody's grandmother had written half a century ago. She would sit for hours with a bone folder and a pot of wheat paste, coaxing broken things back into one piece. I understood that instinct better than I wanted to admit. Her studio smelled the way I imagined my own soul would smell if you could somehow bottle it. Paper and glue and patience. I found excuses to stop by, though I always told myself I was only picking up the invitations. She would look up from her workbench with a smile that reached her eyes slowly, the way sunrise reaches into a room, and she would show me whatever she was mending that day, and an hour would disappear before either of us noticed it was gone. Planning a wedding throws people together, and it kept throwing Nadia and me into the same rooms. At first I did not think anything of it. She offered to hand-stitch our invitations, 150 of them, folded and sewn one at a time, because she said machine-cut edges felt cold. She brought a book by my apartment once, a first edition I had mentioned wanting to see, and stayed 2 hours talking about it. Then she came back the next week with another, then another. I told myself she was just being kind. Looking back, I think part of me knew better and looked away on purpose, because looking straight at it would have asked something of me I was not ready to give. She had a way of paying attention that I was not used to. Blair would ask how my day was and be halfway to her next thought before I answered. Nadia would ask, and then she would wait, and then she would remember. She knew which project was keeping me up at night. She knew I took my coffee black in the morning and switched to tea when I was stressed. And one day she simply started bringing the tea. A particular one, smoky and dark, that she brewed in my kitchen like she had done it 1,000 times before. I did not have any of that with Blair. What I had with Blair was motion, momentum, the constant bright forward rush of a woman who was always planning the next beautiful thing. It was exciting. It was also, I can see now, a kind of noise. And in the middle of all that noise, Nadia was the one still, clear note I kept turning toward, without understanding why I was turning. There were things about her I could not quite explain. Whenever she got nervous or thoughtful, her hands would find a scrap of paper and start folding. A receipt, a napkin, the corner of a menu, creasing it into small, precise shapes without even seeming to notice she was doing it. And every single time she did it, something in my chest would tug, some old familiar ache I could not name. Like a song you have heard before but cannot place. I would shake it off. I told myself I was tired. One evening she was at my apartment, organizing my shelves the way she liked to do, and she found the box. I keep a small wooden box on the highest shelf, the one thing I have moved from apartment to apartment without ever really unpacking. She asked if she could open it, and I said yes before I thought it through. Inside were the few things I had carried out of the wreck of my old life. A watch that had belonged to my father, a photograph, and a single paper crane, folded from a cream-colored card, gone soft at the edges from 3 years of being held. She went very still when she saw it. I did not notice then. I have thought about it 1,000 times since. "You kept this," she said. Her voice had gone careful. "For 3 years," I said. And then, because she was the kind of person you told the truth to, I told her the rest of it. It was the worst month of my life. The divorce had just come through. A friend dragged me to some charity gala, and I sat in the corner feeling like the loneliest man in the whole state of Georgia. I did not talk to anyone. I could not. And this stranger, a young woman, I never even got her name, folded that out of the drink menu and set it down right next to my hand. She said one kind thing and walked away before I could answer. I do not know why, but it got me through that year. I have kept it ever since. Nadia did not say anything for a long moment. Her fingers had stopped moving entirely. When she finally spoke, she was not looking at me. "You keep things longer than most people would. Only the ones that got me through something," I said. She smiled at that, but it was a strange smile, the kind that has something else living underneath it. I thought maybe she was just moved by the story. I did not understand that she was sitting in my living room holding proof of a moment I had spent 3 years being grateful for, and that she could not tell me what she knew. Not then, not with a wedding 2 weeks out, and her sister's ring sitting on my counter. Anyone watching my life from the outside would have seen it before I did. That is how these things always go. The truth is often standing right there in front of you, folding paper cranes at your kitchen table, and you are simply too close to read it. As the wedding got nearer, Something in Nadia changed. She got quieter, and not the easy quiet I had come to like. A tighter one. She would start to say something and then stop herself, swallow it back down. More than once I caught her looking at me across a room full of Blair's planning binders. Her expression caught somewhere between worry and something sadder that I did not have a word for. I asked her once if she was all right. We were in my kitchen. She was folding a napkin into a crane without looking at her hands, and her fingers stalled. "I am fine," she said. Then, after a pause, "Are you happy, Desmond? Really happy?" It was a strange question, coming 2 weeks before I was supposed to marry her sister. I gave her the answer you are supposed to give. I said of course I was. She nodded like she had expected exactly that, and something closed quietly behind her eyes. There was a night, weeks before any of this came apart, when she stood in my kitchen doorway with her coat already on and her hand on the frame, and she opened her mouth like she was about to say the single most important sentence of her life. Then her eyes dropped to the ring sitting on the counter, and she closed her mouth again, and she said good night instead. I remember thinking at the time that it was nothing. I remember it now as everything. I should have pushed. I did not. I was a man walking cheerfully toward the edge of a cliff, and the one person trying to warn me was doing it in a language I had not learned to hear yet. A few days before the wedding, she called me. Her voice was different, flat, deliberate, like she had rehearsed the words and was afraid she would lose her nerve if she slowed down for even a second. "Can you meet me?" she said. "Somewhere private. Not the house. Before you marry my sister, there is something you need to hear." The place she chose was a quiet bar on the top floor of a hotel downtown. The kind of place with low light and lower voices, where the whole city spreads out under the windows like a lit circuit board. I got there first. I ordered a whiskey and I waited, turning the glass slowly on the marble, watching the amber catch the candlelight. When she came in, she was wearing a deep navy dress, and she looked like a person walking toward something she had been dreading for a very long time. She sat down. She ordered a martini she never touched, and for a while she just looked at me, gathering herself. "Whatever this is," I said gently, "you can just say it." So she did. She reached into her bag and took out a folded sheet of paper and slid it across the marble to me. It was a copy of a lease. An apartment across town, a nice one, signed 8 months earlier. 2 names on it, my fiancé's, and a man named Colin Reeve. "He is a client of hers," Nadia said quietly. He was. It stopped being about real estate a long time ago. I did not want to believe it either. I followed her, Desmond. I hated myself for doing it, but I could not let you stand up at that altar not knowing. I looked at the lease. I looked at the 2 names. And the strange thing was, I did not feel the floor drop out from under me the way you would expect. I felt something quieter and worse. A kind of grim recognition, like a suspicion I had been refusing to look at for months, finally stepping into the light. Somewhere underneath the shock, a small voice said, of course, this is what it was." Nadia was watching my face. Whatever she saw there broke something loose in her. Her eyes filled, and she reached across and put her hand over mine on the cold stone. "I am so sorry," she said. "You deserved so much better than my family. You deserved better than all of us." And then, I think she surprised even herself. She leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. It was not a romantic kiss, not the way it would look to anyone watching from across the room. It was a goodbye. It was 3 years of something she had never once said pressed into one quiet gesture, meant to be folded up and put away forever. I froze. I did not kiss her back. I did not move at all. I just sat there with Elise in one hand and her lips against my cheek, feeling the whole shape of my life rearrange itself in the space of a single breath. Neither of us saw her, because Blair was there, in that same bar, on that same night, 40 feet away, because Blair had come to that hotel to meet Colin. She was standing near the entrance in a champagne-colored dress, and she had gone absolutely still, and she had watched her younger sister's mouth press against my cheek. I only knew any of it when I heard her voice cut clean across the room. "Are you kidding me?" Heads turned. Blair came across that floor like a storm front rolling in. And what happened next I will remember for the rest of my life, because it taught me exactly who she was. She did not ask what was going on. She did not glance at the paper in my hand. She took one look at the picture, her sister, her fiancé, a kiss, and she built her entire performance out of it in the space of a second. She has been after you this whole time, Blair said, and her voice was already climbing, already reaching for the people at the nearby tables, pulling them in to be her audience. My own sister. I knew it. I always knew it. She could never stand to see me happy. Blair. No. She was crying now, real tears, summoned with terrifying ease. Do you have any idea what it is like? To watch your little sister throw herself at the man you are about to marry? Here is the thing I learned that night about a certain kind of person. They can take the truth and pick it up like a weapon. They can turn it in their hand until the sharp end is pointing at the one person who told it. In 3 sentences, Blair had rewritten the entire evening. Nadia was no longer the sister who had risked everything to save me. She was the jealous girl who had tried to steal her sister's husband. And it was working. I could see it landing on the faces all around us. That is the terrible genius of it. Nobody in that room had seen the beginning of the night. They had only arrived in time for the tears, and tears are loud, and Elise is quiet. And most people will believe the loudest thing said in front of them every single time. I watched a whole room of strangers decide, in under a minute, that the woman crying was the wounded one and the woman sitting silent was the guilty one. They had it exactly backward, and not one of them knew it. Nadia did not defend herself. That was the part that undid me. She just sat there and took it, absorbing every word, because some part of her had probably been braced for exactly this her whole life. But I was still holding the lease, and I was watching Blair's hands, because here's what nobody else in that room could see. Blair's hands were shaking, not the way a betrayed woman's hands shake. Her eyes kept flicking to the folded paper in my grip, to it and away, to it and away, and beneath all that beautiful, practiced grief, she was afraid. She was not shaking because her heart was broken. She was shaking because she had just been caught. Blair, I said. I did not raise my voice. I have noticed that the quietest thing in a loud room is sometimes the only thing people truly hear. Then why is Colin's name on this lease? Not mine. His. The room went still. Blair's mouth opened, and nothing came out. Her martini glass caught her sleeve as she stepped back, and it went over, gin spreading across the marble in a slow, bright sheet. A chair scraped somewhere behind us, and on the bar in front of me, forgotten, sat the little paper crane Nadia had folded out of a cocktail napkin while she waited for me to arrive. Blair, reaching blindly for something to do with her hands, closed her fist around it and crushed it flat. I looked down at that flattened little bird for a long moment. Something about it losing its shape under her fist felt like the truest picture of the whole year I had spent beside her. Everything gentle that came within reach of those hands eventually got crushed, quietly, and then smoothed back over so quickly that afterward you could almost talk yourself into believing you had imagined the damage. She caught herself fast. She always did. Within seconds she had swept out of the bar with her chin held high, muttering to no one about how she would not stand there and be attacked, gathering up the sympathy of strangers as she went. But it was already too late. I had seen it, and more importantly, I had finally seen her. The days after that do not come back to me in any order. They come back in pieces. The pieces fit together into a picture I could not unsee. Colin Reeve was a developer Blair had met through her work, and the affair had been going on for the better part of a year. 8 months, the lease said, and probably longer than that in truth. What shook me most was not the betrayal itself. It was understanding, finally, why she had wanted to marry me in the first place. I was the safe photograph, the respectable one, the rising architect who looked right on the invitations while she kept the other life running quietly across town. She never needed me at all. She needed what I looked like standing next to her. I should have felt destroyed. Mostly I felt strangely calm, like a man who has been squinting for years and someone has finally handed him the right glasses. I kept coming back to one thing in particular. Not the lease. Not Colin's name printed there in plain black letters. What I could not shake was the memory of every time Blair had told me she loved me, and how, each and every time, she had been looking just slightly past me, toward a mirror, toward a window, toward the version of the evening she wanted other people to see. I had spent a whole year mistaking a spotlight for the sun. Nadia and I met one more time that week, at a coffee shop near her studio, because there were things that still needed saying, and neither of us could say them over a phone. She looked exhausted. Her family had turned on her exactly the way Blair had aimed them to. Her own mother had called her a liar. She had lost all of them in a single night, and she had done it to save a man who was not even hers. She stirred her coffee and did not drink it. Her hands, which were never once still, had gone quiet in a way that frightened me more than any tears would have. Here was a woman who had spent her entire life mending other people's broken things, and now the thing that was broken was her own family, and there was no bone folder in the world that could set that spine again. "Why?" I asked her. "Why would you burn your whole family down for me?" She was quiet for a long time, and then she told me the last thing, the thing she had been carrying since the moment she saw that crane in my box. 3 years ago, she said, there was a charity gala. There was a man sitting alone in the corner of it. He looked like the loneliest person I had ever seen in my life, and I did not know how to help him, so I did the only thing I knew how to do. I folded him a paper crane out of the drink menu, and I set it down right next to his hand, and I told him it was going to get better. And then I lost my nerve, and I walked away before he could say a word. She finally lifted her eyes to mine. "I was the one who folded that crane, Desmond. It was you. It was always you. I've been quiet about it ever since." I sat there with 3 years of my life rearranging themselves for the second time in 1 week. The stranger who had saved me, the girl I had never been able to find and thank, she had been sitting at my kitchen table for a year, brewing my tea, folding paper without a word, watching me get ready to marry her sister, and she had never once asked me for anything in return. 3 years of loving a man who did not even know her name, and she had carried it the way she carried everything fragile, carefully, and without a word of complaint. I thought about all the tea she had brewed in my kitchen, all the books she had carried up my stairs, all the paper cranes folded and left on my table and never once explained. A whole year of a woman loving me in the only language she trusted, a quiet one, while I stood there fluent in nothing but noise. There is a version of this story where I reach across that little table and take her hand and we walk out into some easy, golden ending. That is not what happened, and I am glad it is not, because it would not have been true, and she of all people deserved something true. What I did was call off the wedding, not in a scene, not with any kind of speech. I simply told Blair it was over, and I meant it in a way that left no door standing open behind me, and I let the truth about Colin do the rest of the work, without ever needing to shout it from a rooftop. And then I looked at Nadia, this woman who had loved me quietly for 3 years and then set her own life on fire to keep me from making the worst mistake of mine. And I told her the truth. "I am not calling it off because of you, Nadia. I put the crane, the old one, the soft-edged one from the box, on the table between us, and the light from the window caught in its worn folds. I am calling it off because for the first time in a long time, I can see clearly. And what happens after this, you and me, that has to wait. It has to wait until I have earned it, until I know I am choosing you because you are you, and not just because I am bleeding." She nodded. She understood. Of course she understood. She had already waited 3 years. She could wait a little longer for me to become a man who was worth the waiting. About a year later, I finished the library. It is a low, quiet building on the north side of town, all warm wood and long windows. Exactly the kind of place I had been trying to build my entire life. And when it came time to restore the collection of old local histories that were going to live in the reading room, split spines, water damage, a century of dust settled into the paper, there was only one person in the world I wanted for the job. That is how it started again. Slowly, the right way this time. Not a flood of messages, not some grand romantic reunion in the rain, just Nadia, at a long table in the back of my new library, a bone folder in her hand and ink on her fingertips, bringing broken books back to life while I worked a few feet away. We would go weeks meeting like that before either of us said anything that really mattered. And I found that I liked it. The ease of it. The way the silence between us never once felt like something that had to be filled. We started getting coffee afterward. Then dinner. Then long walks through the city with no particular place we needed to be. I remember one evening in particular, standing on the bridge over the river with the whole downtown lit up behind her, when she told me about a book she was restoring. A family Bible with 100 years of names written into the front of it, and how her favorite part of the whole job was reading the handwriting of people who were long gone and giving their words a few more decades of life. That was the whole of her. She loved the things everyone else had already decided were finished. I had been one of those things once. Maybe that was the entire point. I got to know her the way I had never once let myself before. Not as Blair's quiet sister, standing at the edge of every room, but as her own whole person. Funny in a dry way you had to lean in close to catch. stubborn about the few things that truly mattered to her, gentle with everything fragile, which turned out to be most of the world. I will not pretend I was not afraid. I had been left once for a shinier man. I had almost married a woman who saw me as a photograph, and somewhere deep in me there still lived a small, tired voice that kept asking the same question. What if it happens again? What if you are just the safe choice one more time, the one who looks right until someone brighter walks in? Nadia never argued with that voice. She never told me I was being foolish, never promised me the world in some big sweeping speech. She just quietly proved the voice wrong, one ordinary day after another. She did not dazzle me. She showed up. She remembered the small things. She stayed exactly as steady in the hard weeks as in the easy ones. And slowly, without my ever noticing the moment it happened, that steadiness dissolved the fear completely. You cannot perform consistency. It is the one thing a person is simply unable to fake, and she had it in her bones. There was no single moment when the fear left me. That is not how it works, whatever the movies want you to believe. It left the way water leaves a room, slowly, along the floor, so that one day you simply glance down and realize the ground has been dry for a while. I looked down one ordinary Tuesday and understood that I had stopped bracing for her to leave. I had stopped waiting for the brighter man to walk through the door. She had made herself so steady that my whole tired body had finally believed her. Her family came around. In time. The truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deep somebody tries to bury it. And when Blair's other life finally came apart at the seams, the whole picture rearranged itself for all of them the same way it had already rearranged itself for me. Her mother called her, months later, and apologized. It did not undo everything overnight, but it was a beginning. And Nadia, who repaired broken things for her living, misunderstood better than almost anyone that a beginning is really all any of us ever gets. Nadia forgave her, mostly, not all at once, and not because the apology erased anything that had been said, but because carrying it around was heavier than setting it down, and she had never once been a person who chose the heavier thing when the lighter one was also true. One morning, near the end of that year, she was at my apartment. Early light was coming in low through the tall windows, catching all the dust in the air, and the whole place smelled like leather and old paper, which is another way of saying it smelled like her. I made the coffee. She sat at my drafting table with a scrap of paper, folding it without looking down at her hands, the way she always had. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "That night, at the bar, why did you really do it? You knew exactly what it was going to cost you." She thought about it. She always thought before she answered. One of 10,000 small things I had come to love about her. "Because I never needed you to be shiny," she said. "That is the part none of them ever understood. Blair wanted the version of you that photographed well. But I liked you the night you had nothing left to shine with. A man alone in a corner who did not have a single thing to give anybody, and was still somehow gentle about it. That is the one I have loved the whole time." I did not have anything to say to that. Some things do not need an answer. You just let them land where they land. She finished folding the scrap in her hands and set it down on the table, and I saw that it was a paper crane. A new one, crisp and perfect. Then she reached into her bag and took out something soft and cream-colored, worn thin at the edges, and set it down beside the new one. The old crane, the one she had folded 4 years earlier, the one I had carried through the worst year of my life. Somewhere along the way, without a single word about it, she had quietly taken it back from the box on my shelf to keep it safe. 2 paper cranes, sitting side by side in the morning light. One old, one new. The very same pair of hands had made them both. "Now you have the whole set," she said. And I understood, finally and completely, that I had never really been alone in that corner at all. Someone had seen me. Someone had been seeing me the entire time. People ask me sometimes how I did not see it. How I could stand 2 weeks from marrying one sister while the other one loved me in plain sight the whole time. And I have stopped being embarrassed by the answer, because the answer is simply true. For most of my life, I thought love was being chosen by the brightest person in the room, the one everyone turned to look at, the one who made me feel pulled up out of deep water. Nadia taught me something different. She taught me that love is not being chosen by the loudest person in the room. It is being seen by the quietest one, the one who stayed honest even when honesty cost her everything she had. Her family, her name, her place at the table. She set all of it down for a man who had not even figured out yet that he loved her back. The loud kind of love fills a room so completely that you never notice the real thing standing just outside the door, folding paper, waiting for you to finally turn around. Blair saw everything that night at the bar. She built a whole performance out of what she saw, but Nadia was the only person who had ever really seen me. In a corner, with nothing left, and loved me anyway. So let me ask you two things before you go. Have you ever mistaken the loudest love for the truest one? And if the quietest person in your life folded you a paper crane, set it down beside your hand, and asked for nothing at all in return, would you even notice? If Nadia's silence hit you somewhere real, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe so you do not miss the next story. And tell me down in the comments, who was the paper crane in your life? I read every single one,